Hello students, welcome to Chapter 4 in Social Problems. Today we're going to be talking about gender inequality. Some of the areas we're going to be discussing today, we're going to talk about the difference between sex and gender. We'll take a look at various norms of authority, patriarchy, matriarchy, egalitarianism, talk about the differences there. We'll take a look at violence against women in society. Take a look at women's transition into the workplace, and finally, women's transition into power in politics. Sociology views sex and gender differently. It views sex as being biological, being born biologically male, biologically female. Males have an XY chromosome, females have an XX chromosome. Takes a look at not only chromosomes, but also sex organs, sex hormones. But when it comes to gender, and I understand that we often use the term sex and gender interchangeably, but sociology as a discipline sees them different. It sees gender as more of cultural. It's something that is socialized. It's something that is taught. It's something that we learn. Our ideas of what is masculine and feminine, we're not born with that. Society shapes that. It influences that. Gender socialization begins at birth, from the moment that we're born. Coming home from the hospital to our family, we may be put into boy clothes or girl clothes, have boy toys, girl toys. So the gender socialization, it starts at a very young age. It's reinforced through peer groups. Whenever young boys are hanging out with other boys, they reinforce masculinity. When girls are hanging around girls, it reinforces femininity, oftentimes in regards to both praise and punishment. Sometimes gender is shaped through bullying and also positive reinforcement. The media can play a part in reinforcing gender roles based on commercials and TV shows. What we're watching can reinforce that. When it comes to our religion, if you are part of a very conservative religious church, they may have very defined ideas of the roles of the male, of the father within the family versus the mother in the family. If you go to a church that is much more liberally minded, they may reinforce gender equality. But all of these external factors have a strong impact on how we view masculinity and femininity. And so we have to also take a look at people that are anthropologists. Anthropologists is a social science, and they study various cultures around the world. And what they typically do is they will go to various cultures and societies and learn everything about them, their laws, their norms, their traditions, their ways of life. And this is something that Margaret Mead did back in the 1930s. She went to New Guinea, which is off the coast of Australia, and she visited 3 different tribes. And she started to notice that the mannerisms and the gender roles of these tribes were very different from each other. And the way that they were raised were very, very different. So among the Arapesh, this was a very peaceful tribe. So they would reinforce peace and nurturing. So since it was a very peaceful tribe, and there wasn't a lot of hostility, both males and females were both very, very nurturing and very, very peaceful. Some would view it as being more feminine. The Mundagumors, however, much more of a masculine tribe. Both the males and the females were highly aggressive, highly masculine, highly violent. At one time, they were actually cannibals, where they actually ate other humans. Exceptionally violent. So they socialized and they taught aggression. The Chambuli tribe was different. This was more of a matriarchal type of society, a female-dominated society where the traditional gender roles of men and women were actually reversed. The women tended to be more dominant, and the males within that society tended to be more passive. So what this showed us by famous anthropologists like this, it started to show us more and more how gender is something that is taught and that is socialized. It's reinforced. Now, sociology doesn't automatically move against the biological aspect of testosterone and estrogen. The whole nature versus nurture is our actions geared more towards our biology or based on our environment. And sociology really kind of accepts both. That our environment shapes us heavily, but also our biological sex of being born male or female can also have an impact on the way that we behave. So let's take a look at the different norms of authority or power. Patriarchy is the global norm. It's the most common form. This is a male-dominated society. So patri is going to be father or male. Archy is authority. This is the most common type of authority on the planet. And they have very defined gender roles. Men are the head of the household. They have certain responsibilities. And women, they're more in a supporting role of taking care of the family and taking care of the children. There's a very strong divided line. The gender roles are very, very traditional. Matriarchy, this is a rare form of authority or power. This is more of a female-dominated type of society. I just talked about that among the Chimbuli tribe. This is going to be where women are going to be more dominant, and they have more say-so over the family. But there's also defined gender roles. Now, when we move into more democratic, industrialized nations like the United States, Western Europe, Australia, Canada, what we see there is more egalitarianism, more gender equality. And these are going to be those societies, these developed societies that have had women's movements to bring about more gender equality. And that's what we see here in the United States. Women are able to vote and hold positions of power in companies, political positions of power. So here in the U.S., we evolved away from a patriarchal America into one that is more egalitarianism. And so what that has also done, that has also blurred the gender roles. We have men that are stay-at-home dads. We have women that are now the primary breadwinners. Our society is becoming much more gender fluid, where people can express themselves in both masculine and feminine ways. And where we see this occurring mostly are going to be in more democratic, industrialized societies where they're promoting egalitarianism. So since this is a course about social problems, one thing we do need to discuss is the social problem of violence against women. This is probably most commonly occurred in more male-dominated societies where men are culturally dominant. They are head of the household. Religiously, they're often considered not only head of the household, but also dominant over women. So in a patriarchal society is male-dominated, where women, a lot of their rights, their opportunities are not offered to them. There's a lot of struggle in patriarchal societies for women to have not only the right to vote, but the right to work and the right to become educated individuals. And since they are viewed as being second-class citizens, anytime we look at a group of people and we can marginalize them and we can discriminate them and we can bring about elements of sexism, that is typically where we are able to see humans becoming more violent. So in these societies, if a woman has ever been accused of quote unquote dishonoring the family, even if it's not her fault, even if she was sexually assaulted or raped, sometimes the family, due to feeling like their family name has been dishonored, sometimes they will act very violently against their own family members. Could be mutilations, could be throwing acid on them, could be even killing them. In patriarchal societies, there's also higher rates of violence against unborn babies. So they have higher rates of female abortions. And the reason this is because within these societies, males are preferred. Males are going to be running the household. They're going to be not only having authority over the family whenever the patriarch passes away, but they're going to inherit the land and the assets, and they're going to be in control of that. If you have a daughter in a heavily patriarchal societies, sometimes the families have to bring about what's called a dowry. A dowry. And a dowry is going to be something that is offered to a prospective groom and their family to marry off the daughter. It can be very expensive. It could be money, it could be cattle, it could be all different types of things. It can be very, very expensive. So the perception here is that not only if we have daughters are they not going to be head of the household, but it can also be very expensive to marry them off. So let's take a look at women's transition into the workforce, some of the trends that are happening here. Let's take a look first at the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution brought about mechanization, assembly lines, and factories, and all different types of appliances that we use today. And so the appliances that were brought into the kitchen and the laundry room, it really kind of sped up the work that a lot of women were doing. So instead of hand washing the dishes, there were now dishwashers. Instead of hand washing clothes and hanging them up outside to dry, we now had washers and dryers. An electric oven. So what this did, it significantly reduced the overall housework that was needed to be done and allowed women to not only become educated, but also to go to work. So women started to get paid wages. They felt empowered because of this. And so it brought about more economic equality within the relationship, within the family unit. So there's a rise of the two-income family due to the Industrial Revolution. We also have to take a look at the impact of the women's movement. So the women's movement started a long time ago in the 1840s. So we have the Equal Pay Act of 1963, and it stated that you are not allowed to discriminate or pay women less based on the fact that they are women for the same amount of experience and for the same job as men have. So the Equal Pay Act, prior to the Equal Pay Act, there were a lot of companies and organizations that would purposely be able to legally pay women less than men simply because they were women. The Equal Pay Act prevented that, said is no, it is sexism, it is discrimination. Another success of the women's movement that really kind of allowed women to move into the workforce a lot easier is called Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So Title VII refers to employment settings, and it states that you are not allowed to discriminate based on the hiring or promotions based on sex, but it also protects other categories. You can't discriminate based on race, color, ethnicity, nationality, and later on it now includes sexual orientation. So now, since these groups are now being protected in regards to employment and promotions, that's why we're seeing more women and ethnic minority groups moving into positions of power in regards to employment. We also have to take a look at World War II. Prior to World War II, large percentage of women were stay-at-home moms. So since the young workforce of young men were off in Europe fighting in World War II, there was a strong need for women to take off their kitchen robes and to go into the factories and the assembly lines and manufacture the things that we needed to win World War II and to keep our economy running. So they were in there for several years. And so during this time, women were making money, they were making the decisions, they felt empowered. And because of that, we've also seen the rise of the two-income family, and we've also seen more women deciding to be career-oriented, to go to college, to get a higher education, to be more career-oriented, and to work outside of the home. So we can actually take a look at this change of women working outside the home. In the year 1900, 20% of women worked outside the home, so a large percentage of them were stay-at-home mothers. Today, half of our workforce are women, and it is projected for that percentage to increase moving into the future. So 75% of mothers today actually work outside the home. The wage gap is narrowing between what men and women make. So today, women earn about 80 cents on the dollar of what men make, and that gap is narrowing, which is a good thing. There are a lot of reasons why there is a gap. There may be issues of discrimination and sexism in the workplace. That could be a factor, but there's other factors as well. Men are more likely to work full-time and overtime. Women are more likely to cut back their hours or to work part-time in order to take care of their children. Men are often pushed or geared towards higher paying occupations in the medical field, attorneys and engineers, those STEM jobs. And a lot of women are still kind of moving into lower paying jobs like being teachers and administrative assistants. But the good thing is that we are seeing more and more women move into these STEM positions. They're becoming doctors, they're becoming lawyers, they're becoming engineers, and they are breaking through what is called the invisible glass ceiling. And the invisible glass ceiling is the invisible social barrier that was put in place for decades and decades in order to protect positions of power and administration and kept those pretty much exclusively to white males. And so due to the success of the women's movement, and for things like Title VII that also protected employment based on race and ethnicity, we are seeing more women and more ethnic minority groups breaking through this invisible glass ceiling. Their status is going up, their standard of living is going up, and their incomes are all rising. We are also seeing this politically as well. Now, politically, when it comes to Congress, which includes the Senate and the House of Representatives, it is still to this day heavily male dominated. But we have to take a look at the trend in the direction that it's going. And the one thing we definitely see is that women are breaking through the invisible glass ceiling politically. You know, we're seeing more women being elected to the House of Representatives. We are seeing more women senators today. We have our first vice president that is a female. And if you take a look at this chart here, you can definitely see the trajectory. If you go back 100 years to around 1920, less than 2% of women were represented in Congress. And today, as you can see, that line is going up, up. So today, around 25% of women make up Congress. That's a lot better than what it used to be. It's still a minority compared to men, but if you take a look at the trend and the direction it's going, and it is projected to go, it's going to keep going up. So the final thoughts for this chapter is that sociology studies social, political, and economic inequalities between men and women in the US and also globally around the world on both micro levels and macro levels to evaluate the cultural experiences of the sexes, various gender dynamics, and the power of women's movements towards gender equality.